I used to think trust cracked quietly, like a creaky floorboard you learn to step around, something you ignore until it gives out beneath your feet. But that night, it didn't creak. It split open like ice under weight, with a sound I'll never forget. Applause. We were at Allison's company Christmas party, a black tie affair on a rooftop in downtown Seattle. High-rise views, waiters carrying trays of champagne flutes, and a live jazz band that probably cost more than my monthly rent. It was one of those over-the-top events that made me feel like an outsider the moment I walked in. Everyone there wore ambition like a cologne. Sharp, expensive, and a little suffocating. I was used to work boots and sawdust. I restore antique furniture and clocks for a living. She was in corporate strategy, climbing some ladder I never fully understood. But I came to support her. I always did. She'd asked me to be there, even bought me a new suit. "Just don't wear your shop shoes," she joked before we left the apartment. I didn't. I dressed the part, smiled at the right people, laughed at the awkward toasts, held her hand when no one was looking, though less and less these days. We had been engaged for 8 months by then. There was a date circled on the calendar in May. A venue booked, deposit paid. Her mother had already started collecting fabric samples. I still remember the envelope labeled, "Save the dates," on the kitchen counter, waiting to be mailed. I thought we were solid. Not perfect, we had our off days like anyone, but solid. Steady. Built on shared goals and morning coffees and late-night Netflix shows and memories of younger, broker versions of ourselves. I thought that mattered. But somewhere along the way something changed. The first warning signs were small. Tiny shifts in her energy, like when a compass needle doesn't point exactly north anymore. I'd ask about her day and get short answers. She started working late more often, first once a week, then 3 times, then most weekdays. Always with the same excuse. "Big presentation coming up. Nate and I are putting in extra hours." Nate. I'd met him once, months ago. Tall, confident, the kind of guy who'd never been awkward in a room. I remember the way he shook my hand. Strong grip, eye contact held a little too long. "So this is the famous fiancé," he said, like I was a curiosity. I didn't like him then. I never said anything to her. I didn't want to seem insecure. But at that Christmas party, I realized insecurity wasn't the problem. It was the truth. It was sometime after the 3rd round of drinks and before dessert when the MC announced the improv game. Team Builder, they called it. Every employee would close their eyes, spin around once, and blindly point at someone in the room. Anyone. The question, who would you most want to spend New Year's Eve with? I didn't think much of it. Sounded silly. One of those games people play when the DJ is late and the champagne's hitting. The new hires went first, mostly picking people at random, laughing nervously. Then came the managers, the department heads. Eventually, Allison's name was called. She stood, smiling, confident. The crowd clapped as she stepped into the circle of lights near the stage. She closed her eyes, spun once, and pointed. Right at Nate. Not toward me, where I was standing just off to the side holding her coat and half a flute of champagne. Not toward her boss or her sister who had tagged along. But directly at Nate. And worse, she didn't hesitate. Didn't spin a second time. Didn't smirk and shrug like it was a misfire. She laughed. He laughed. The room erupted. Cheers, whistles, people calling things like, "Oh, someone's staying late for more than PowerPoints." Nate stood up theatrically and bowed. She mock curtsied. And then, it was subtle, but on the big screen where they were projecting the livestream footage, I saw it. A hand on her waist. And she didn't pull away. That moment, 15 seconds, maybe less, felt longer than our entire engagement. I stood there watching, unsure what to do with my hands, unsure if anyone else could feel the air go cold around me. I forced a laugh. The kind you do when you stub your toe but pretend it didn't hurt. The kind that says, "Yeah, I'm cool with this. Totally fine." She didn't look back at me. Not once. The next person's name was called. The game continued. The music picked back up. Servers brought out tiny desserts on ceramic spoons. People danced. Nate and Allison disappeared into the crowd. I found myself drifting toward the terrace, away from the laughter and the fake snow machine someone thought was a good idea. I stood there looking over the city. Gray streets, cars like ants, everything below glowing like a world I no longer belonged to. My phone buzzed. A message from Allison. Having fun? Face blowing a kiss. I stared at it. Having fun? I took a deep breath and typed back. Yep, great party. Sent it. Slipped my phone back into my pocket and watched my reflection in the glass door behind me. I didn't recognize the guy standing there in a suit that didn't quite fit, alone in a crowd of people who didn't notice he'd vanished. Eventually, she came out to find me, wrapped her arms around mine like nothing happened. You disappeared, she said. Needed some air. She kissed my cheek and smiled. That game was ridiculous, huh? Yeah, real funny. She looked up at me, eyes scanning, calculating. I just picked Nate to mess with everyone. You know how tense things have been in the team lately. It was a joke. A joke, I repeated. She nodded, sipping her champagne. Breaking the ice. God, you looked so serious. Were you jealous? That was the part that got me. The tone in her voice. Like teasing. Like my hurt was some harmless side effect of her cleverness. I wanted to say something meaningful, something sharp enough to make her understand what she'd done. But I couldn't. I just looked at her, standing there like she didn't owe me an explanation, like I was overreacting. Of course not, I lied. She smiled again. Good, because you know you're the only one I'd actually want to kiss at midnight. But I didn't know that. Not anymore. We left an hour later after the final speech. She said her goodbyes, laughed with her coworkers, hugged Nate again, and slipped into the cab beside me as if nothing had shifted. As if the game, the gesture, the waist grab, the absence of hesitation, none of it meant anything. I looked out the window most of the ride home. She scrolled on her phone. Probably Instagram. Probably checking how she looked on the live stream. I didn't ask. I didn't have to. Somewhere around the Fremont Bridge, she leaned her head on my shoulder. Love you, she mumbled sleepily. I didn't answer right away. I stared at our reflection in the cab window, the couple we were supposed to be. I love you too, I said eventually, but I already knew I was lying. Because jokes don't feel like confirmation. Jokes don't hold people like that. Jokes don't humiliate the person you're supposed to spend your life with. Not unless the joke's just a shield for something worse. And deep down, I knew. The joke wasn't the problem. It was the truth underneath it. The mind has a cruel way of rewriting memory once something breaks. You start looking backward not for comfort, but for evidence. That night after the party, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her breath slow and steady beside me, while my own thoughts raced like a clock I couldn't silence. I kept trying to convince myself I was overreacting. But once doubt plants itself, it grows like ivy. Quiet, persistent, always reaching. On the way home, I barely spoke. She didn't notice. She was scrolling through her phone, laughing at something on Instagram. Maybe a meme, maybe a photo someone had taken at the party. Maybe something from Nate. I didn't ask. I didn't want to seem paranoid. That was my first mistake. The second was pretending this started at the Christmas party. Didn't. Looking back, the signs were all there. I just didn't want to believe them. You don't when it's someone you love. You tell yourself you're being unfair, untrusting. You rationalize what feels off because the alternative is worse. It began subtly. At first, Allison's schedule shifted. Nothing major, just a few late nights here and there. Quarterly report season, she said. I didn't question it. I knew her job was demanding. But then it became consistent. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she stayed late. Sometimes Friday. Always with Nate. Always at the office. I asked once, jokingly, "You two starting a startup together?" She laughed and said, "Don't be silly. He's just good at organizing chaos." She started coming home tired, distant. Her makeup would be gone, but her hair still fresh. Her perfume would linger longer than usual, stronger, like she'd reapplied it somewhere between the office and home. Once or twice, she went straight to the shower before even kissing me hello. I figured she was just exhausted or stressed. Then there was her phone. One day I noticed she'd started putting it on Do Not Disturb during dinner. First I thought it was sweet, a small boundary in a digital world. But it stayed on all night. Every night. She said it helped her sleep, that the work notifications gave her anxiety. But one evening I caught the screen lighting up repeatedly from across the room. Texts, one after another. She didn't flinch, didn't even glance toward it. I asked, casually, "You're popular tonight?" She shrugged. "It's probably just group chats." And then she flipped it over, screen down. After that, her phone became a locked box. I never touched it, never asked for her passcode. That was her world, and I believed people deserve privacy. But privacy started looking a lot like secrecy. Then came the gym bottle. It was a Tuesday night. She'd driven herself to work that day, said she had a meeting downtown and might grab dinner after. When I went out to her car the next morning to grab my phone charger, I noticed something on the passenger seat. A black water bottle with the logo of a high-end athletic brand. One I knew she didn't use. I picked it up. It smelled faintly of mint. The kind of mint that clings to gum or aftershave. Not her scent. When she came downstairs, I held it up. "You leave this in the car?" She looked at it. For just a split second, her expression shifted, tightened. Then she laughed. "Oh, that's Nate's. He gave it to me after we tried that team workout thing last week. I told him I'd bring it back." "Team workout thing, right?" I nodded. "Cool." She took it from my hand and tossed it into her work bag like it didn't matter. Maybe it didn't. Maybe it was harmless. But that pause, that millisecond, stuck in my brain like a splinter. Other things started piling up. Her perfume changed 3 times over 2 months. She said she was experimenting. That she was tired of smelling like every woman in Seattle. I told her she smelled great either way. But now I wonder, was she testing different versions of herself for different people? She stopped visiting my parents. That was the big one. Before, she'd always made the effort. My mom loved her, and Allison always said family was non-negotiable. But then one weekend, she bailed at the last minute. "Emergency meeting," she said. Something about supply chain delays. She apologized and said we'd reschedule. The next time, same thing. "Sorry, something came up. Nate's out sick and I have to present." The time after that, she didn't even offer an excuse. Just said, "You go. I need a day to myself." I didn't push her. She looked tired, worn out. I assumed it was work. But it wasn't work. I started noticing the little things too. Her voice when she said his name, lighter, playful. The way she talked about their team synergy, how Nate really gets stuff done. Or Nate's good at cutting through the noise. Once, I teased her. "Should I be worried you like him more than me?" She laughed, rolled her eyes and said, "Please, he's not even my type." That sentence echoed for days after. Not even my type. Not, "I love you." Not, "Don't be ridiculous." Just not my type. And yet she kept choosing him. In conversation, in time spent, in trust given. Even in that stupid party game. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. That I was projecting. That if I brought it up too often, I'd become the jealous fiancé no one wanted to be with. So instead, I kept quiet. I tried to be better. More available. More supportive. Cooked more. Cleaned more. Took her car for oil changes. Left her notes in her coat pockets. Every effort was met with a tired smile or a distracted thank you. Sometimes she'd come home and find me working on a clock in my shop, and she'd sit across from me, legs curled up in the corner chair, scrolling on her phone. I used to love those nights. Her quiet presence felt like home. But lately, she didn't stay long. Sometimes just a few minutes, then a vague, "I'm gonna crash early, babe," and she'd disappear upstairs. One night, I followed a gut instinct and checked the client logbook I kept in the workshop. She had once joked that I was too analog for the digital age, always writing my orders and client info in longhand. But I liked it, felt grounded, personal. There was a new entry, handwritten just like the others, but the penmanship was slightly different. Slanted, more elegant. It read, "Clock Restoration, gift for N. Walsh." Need full replica. Rush order. I hadn't taken that order, and there was no N. Walsh in my files. I stared at the page for a full minute before it clicked. Nate Reynolds. I flipped back through my records. No such client. No outreach email. No payment received. But it was written in the log like a real commission, like something someone wanted me to restore in secret. That's when I remembered something else. Weeks ago, she'd come into the shop on a Saturday. Said she wanted to see what I was working on, which was rare. She sat quietly while I restored the inner workings of a mid-century carriage clock. Brass details, oak frame, a gift someone had brought in for their grandfather. She asked a lot of questions about how the replica process worked, how close I could get it to the original, how long it would take. Now it made sense. She wasn't curious. She was planning something. I remember sitting there, staring at that logbook, my heart pounding like a hammer against my ribs. I thought of every dinner I'd cooked, every weekend I'd spent building a life around her, every morning coffee I brought upstairs while she was still half asleep. And now I was making things, restoring things with my hands, for someone else. For him. It was like being erased from my own life, pixel by pixel. And still I said nothing. That night she came home around 10. Her hair was damp. She said she'd stopped by a friend's place for wine and girl talk. She kissed me on the cheek and asked if I wanted to finish the movie we'd started last week. I nodded. We sat on the couch. She leaned into me, wrapped in a blanket, and I tried to pretend it was normal. I tried to be the man she used to love. But the silence between us had changed. I wasn't sure if I was still in a relationship or just playing the role of a placeholder. The worst part was, I still wanted to believe her. That night, I laid awake again, staring at the same ceiling, same shadows, same shape of her curled beside me. But now I was certain of one thing. If there was a truth behind her stories, she wasn't telling it to me. I don't remember falling asleep the night after the party, only waking up in the dark with the taste of dread still in my mouth. It was sometime after 3 a.m., and the silence in our apartment felt too quiet. I stared at the ceiling for a while, her back turned to me, the curve of her shoulder rising with each steady breath. She was sleeping peacefully. I wasn't. Something in me snapped. Not loud or dramatic, just quiet and final. I needed space to think, to breathe, to stop replaying the image of her hand on Nate's arm in slow motion. So I got dressed, grabbed my keys, and drove to my workshop. I hadn't planned to do anything. I just needed to be in a place that still felt like mine. The moment I stepped inside, I noticed it. A faint scent. Familiar but out of place. Her perfume. She hadn't been here in weeks. Not since early November. I remember because I'd been working on a grandfather clock for a retired Navy vet, and she sat in the corner reading, sipping tea, saying she liked the sound of ticking in a quiet room. But now, here in late December, her scent was fresh. Not the perfume she wore to work. A different one. Lighter. More floral. One I hadn't smelled on her before. I walked deeper into the shop. It was cold. I hadn't left the heat on. But the air still held warmth from something recent, movement, presence. Something that didn't belong. Then I saw it. Her scarf. Gray cashmere. Draped over the back of the same chair she used to sit in, the one with a coffee stain on the armrest. She must have left it, or planted it. I wasn't sure anymore. I picked it up, ran it through my fingers. Still soft, still smelled like her. And that's when the second thing hit me. The logbook. I kept it near my desk. A beaten leather-bound journal where I wrote every client detail. Names, drop-off dates, restoration notes. It was one of the few things I didn't digitize. Handwriting always made things feel real, traceable. I flipped it open, unsure what I was looking for. Then I found it again. Same entry I'd seen before. Page marked in faint pencil. Clock restoration for N. Walsh, gift. Full replica needed. Rush order. That name again. N. Walsh. Not a client I knew. Not one who ever paid me. And I didn't write this entry. The handwriting wasn't mine. But I recognized it instantly. Allison's. I flipped back to a grocery list she once scribbled on the back of a receipt. Same curves in her LS. Same upward tail in the lowercase r. Same loop in the GS. It was her. She'd been here using my space. Using my tools. Using me. I started tracing the timeline. The day she stopped by just to visit suddenly lined up with the day I'd pulled that carriage clock from storage. It was an old English piece. Heavy, brass fixtures, hand-carved frame. Rare, but not one of a kind until I restored it. That night she'd asked me strange questions. Not casual curiosity. Detailed ones. How long it would take to replicate. Could I match the patina on the brass? Would someone be able to tell the difference? I thought she was just being supportive. Interested in my world. Now I saw it for what it was. She had taken notes. She had asked questions not to learn, but to prepare. I felt sick. Still holding the scarf in one hand, I turned to my storage shelves, where I kept half-finished jobs. The carriage clock was gone. Not the original. The replica I'd made 2 weeks ago. The one I hadn't yet invoiced. I remembered thinking it was strange how it disappeared, but assumed I'd moved it. Now I knew better. I checked the drawers beneath the counter, where I stored backup materials, old sketches, clock parts, keys. Tucked under a pile of workshop invoices was a USB drive. Silver. Labeled in her handwriting again. Ref #147R. My hands shook as I plugged it into the old laptop I kept out there. The drive held only one file. PDF. Blueprints. Full dimensions. A spec sheet I'd drawn up. Annotated, this time not by me, but by her. At the bottom, a line of text. 1-to-1 replica. Fully restored. He won't suspect a thing. That was it. That was the moment everything in me went quiet. She'd used my time, my tools, my craft, my trust, to build something for someone else. For Nate, a gift, a symbol, something in asterisk mate disguised as craftsmanship. I felt like I'd been hollowed out. I sat there in the dark, in the smell of oil and cedar, staring at that screen like it was a confession. I had become the middleman in my own betrayal. Back at the apartment, I didn't confront her. Not yet. When I walked in, she was curled up on the couch in a blanket, watching one of those baking shows where contestants cry over sponge cake. She looked peaceful, tired, innocent even. She glanced up. "Hey, where'd you go?" "Just needed to think." "You okay?" Her voice was soft. I nodded. But I wasn't okay. Because in the corner of the room, near the tree we hadn't finished decorating, I saw something else missing. The small box I'd hidden behind the garland, her New Year's gift. Gone. It was a hand-carved wood box, inlaid with a tiny metal plate engraved with the words, "For us." I made it in the shop 2 months earlier. Planned to give it to her on the 31st. Inside was a letter. Not a cheesy one, just simple, honest. About how I believed in us. About how I knew we were going through something, but I wanted to fight for it. That box was gone. And that's when I knew this wasn't accidental. She hadn't just made a mistake. She'd made a choice. And she'd made it long before the Christmas party. I sat on the edge of the bed later that night while she brushed her teeth, wondering how long it had really been going on. Wondering how many things in our home she'd looked at while thinking of someone else. Wondering if I'd ever see her the same again. I think the part that hurt the most wasn't the lie. It was that she didn't even try to hide it well. She believed I wouldn't see it. That I was too trusting, too soft, too slow to notice. But I saw it now. Everything. And the truth wasn't just painful. It was deliberate. The morning after I found the USB drive, I woke to the sound of silence. Not the comforting kind. The hollow kind. The kind that settles over a place when something or someone is missing. Allison was gone. I checked the time. 7:12 a.m. Too early for a Saturday. Normally she would still be asleep, tangled in the blankets. One arm flopped across the edge of the bed. But the bed was perfectly smooth on her side. Tucked. Cold. At first I thought maybe she'd gone out for coffee. That was her weekend ritual. Walk down to the cafe on 4th. Get us 2 Americanos and a croissant to share. But her car keys were gone. So was her laptop bag. And the scarf. The same one I'd found in my workshop. Gone again. I walked through the apartment like I was seeing it for the first time. Things felt lighter. Not emotionally, physically. The hallway table where she kept her sunglasses. Empty. The bathroom counter, missing half her products. Her toothbrush wasn't in the holder. Just mine, standing alone like a witness. I opened the closet. That's when it hit me. Space. Literal space. Between the hangers. Gaps where her jackets used to be. A section of the top shelf completely cleared. Her suitcase gone. At that point, I wasn't even shocked. Just numb. She hadn't left a note. Not a text. Not a call. She hadn't even taken the time to lie. She just disappeared. I walked into the kitchen, hoping. What? That she'd left a message on the fridge? A post-it on the counter? Something to suggest she cared about how this would land? Nothing. Just crumbs from the bread I sliced last night and the scent of vanilla from the candle she left burning. I opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and noticed something else. Her magnet board. The one where she kept weekly meal plans, random grocery lists, post-its with her favorite quotes. Completely bare. As if she had never lived here at all. I stood in the middle of our living room trying to process it. Less than 24 hours ago, she had kissed me goodnight. Now she was gone. I started checking drawers. Not to be invasive, just to confirm I wasn't imagining it. Her desk was empty. No notebooks, no pens, no folders. Even the spare key she kept in the junk drawer missing. It wasn't a spontaneous decision. She had planned this. Carefully. Strategically. A slow vanishing act disguised as normal life. I walked back to the bedroom and looked again at the empty closet. Then I noticed something else. The New Year's gift. The one I had made her. The box I had carved. It wasn't just missing, it had been taken. As if it belonged to her. As if it had always been part of the plan. I sat down on the edge of the bed, feeling like I'd fallen through the floor of my own life. The strange thing was I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was just trying to make sense of the math. Of the timing. The scarf in the shop. The entry in the logbook. The missing clock. The erased emails. The sudden quiet in the middle of a life that used to be full of sound. I picked up my phone and texted her. "Are you okay?" No response. 5 minutes passed. 10. I tried calling. Straight to voicemail. Blocked? Maybe. Or maybe she just didn't care enough to reply. At 11:43 a.m. I got in my car and drove. Nowhere specific. I just needed to move. To put distance between me and the space she had emptied. I ended up at a thrift bookstore near the University District. We used to come here together. She'd browse the travel section. I'd get lost in restoration guides. I sat in the car for almost 20 minutes, engine off, staring at the rain running down the windshield. Eventually, I went inside. I didn't buy anything, just wandered. Pretended I was someone else for a while. Someone whose fiancé hadn't quietly packed up and ghosted him in the middle of their engagement. That night, I went home to a quiet apartment. I checked the front desk in our building. No one had seen her leave. No security footage I could request. She'd probably parked in the back and slipped out unnoticed. I slept on the couch. Not because the bed was off limits, but because the bedroom felt like a room that belonged to a stranger. I couldn't bring myself to crawl into sheets that still smelled like her. The next day, I went to her sister's place. I didn't call ahead. Just showed up with 2 coffees and a need for answers. Rachel looked surprised to see me. Not guilty, just awkward. I could tell immediately she knew something. She invited me in, cleared space on the counter, and asked how I was doing. That's when I asked the question I already knew the answer to. When did she leave? Rachel froze. Her hand stopped mid-reach for a coffee mug. What do you mean? She asked, playing dumb. I gave her a look. The kind that says, don't lie to me. Not now. She sighed. Sat down at the counter. A few days ago. My throat went dry. A few days. She nodded slowly. She said she needed space. That things had gotten complicated. Complicated? I repeated. Did she say where she was going? She said she was crashing with a friend for a bit. That's all I know. I didn't buy it. Not entirely. Then she said something that made everything click. I helped her move a few boxes. Well, one big one mostly. It was heavy, wooden. I thought it was furniture. She said it was sentimental. I stared at her. What kind of box? Old-looking, handcrafted, with a little plate on the top. My chest tightened. Did it say, "For us" on it? Rachel blinked. Yeah. How did you know? Because I built it. With my hands. For Allison. I didn't say anything. Just nodded. Swallowed hard. Tried to keep my voice even. Where did you take it? She hesitated. Rachel. I shouldn't say. She's already gone. You can't protect her from something she's already done. She exhaled slowly. It was a residential drop-off. She had me help load it into the car. Then we took it to an address near Green Lake. She said she was leaving it for someone. My mind raced. Do you remember the address? She pulled out her phone, scrolled through the GPS history, showed me the screen. It was Nate's building. Not just the neighborhood, his exact complex. I didn't say anything, just stared at the pin on the screen. Felt like my stomach had turned to stone. Rachel looked at me, eyes wide. I didn't know. I know. I left before she could apologize. On the way home, I drove past Nate's place. I didn't stop, didn't go inside. I just needed to see it, to know it was real, to confirm that what I felt wasn't paranoia. It was fact. There, by the side entrance, was a familiar wooden box sitting near the lobby drop-off cage. I recognized the grain of the wood, the way I had etched a small notch into the back panel for the key. The same box I had made for her. For us. Now it was for him. Or maybe someone else. It didn't matter anymore. Because this was no longer a story about a woman who got confused. Or tired. Or lonely. This was someone who had orchestrated her exit weeks ago. Maybe months. She didn't just disappear. She replaced me in silence. And I hadn't seen it until the door had already closed behind her. There are moments in life you rehearse without knowing. Scenes you play in your head long before they unfold. The confrontation. The revelation. The moment you finally get to ask, why? But when it actually happens, it never plays out the way you imagined. You don't feel strong. You don't feel righteous. You just feel tired. I told myself I wouldn't go near Nate. That this wasn't about him. That whatever happened between them, he owed me nothing compared to what she owed me. But curiosity has a weight of its own. I drove to his office building on a Monday. Midday. Not impulsively. I'd thought about it all weekend. Looked up the company directory. Knew what floor he worked on, what his schedule looked like based on LinkedIn posts and their team calendar, which, in a moment of weakness, I still had access to through her shared drives. He wasn't expecting me. That much was obvious when the receptionist called up and her expression froze after saying my name. "One moment," she said, tapping her headset. "He'll meet you in the lounge area." When he came out of the elevator, he didn't look surprised. That was the worst part. He didn't look shocked. Just ready. As if he'd known this day would come. "Hey," he said, nodding like we were casual acquaintances at a bar. "Let's talk." I followed him into a side conference room. Glass walls. A fake plant in the corner. Table meant for 6. I sat at one end. He sat across from me, arms folded. I got right to it. "I'm not here to scream," I said. "I just want the truth." He nodded slowly like he respected that. Or maybe he was just relieved. "She told me you'd figure it out eventually," he said. "I didn't expect it to take this long." That hit harder than I expected. "How long has it been going on?" He sighed. "It's complicated." "No," I said flatly. "It's really not. Just answer." He ran a hand through his hair. "A few months. 5, maybe 6. Started small. After work. Talking. You probably noticed she was staying late." I didn't respond. He continued. "She told me things were rough between you two. That you were growing apart. That she didn't know how to fix it." I stared at him. "And you believed her?" He hesitated. "I wanted to." I leaned back. "So what now? You two running off into the sunset?" He shook his head. "No. It's already over." That caught me off guard. What? She cut things off. A week ago. Maybe more. After she dropped that box off, she said she couldn't do it anymore. What box? He looked confused. You don't know? I built it. He blinked. You what? I made it. That box she gave you. The clock inside. That was my work. My shop. My hands. He looked stunned. I thought it was a family piece. She said it was her grandfather's. Of course she did, I said bitterly. It's a good story. Winter nights in a mountain cabin. Passed down through generations. That's what she told you, right? He nodded, slower this time. I could see his confidence unraveling. I didn't know, he said quietly. I swear, man, I didn't know she lied about that too. I believed him. I didn't want to, but I did. He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, then slid it across the table. Security footage. She came by last Thursday, he said. Dropped the box off. We didn't talk long. She seemed off. I thought she was just emotional. I watched the footage. She entered the lobby, carrying the clock wrapped in a thick blanket. No makeup, no smile, no act. She left it with the front desk and walked out without turning back. Check the next clip, he said. The video switched. Same lobby. 2 hours later. She came back. But she wasn't alone. A man followed her inside. Taller than me. Dark jacket. Duffel bag slung over one shoulder. They didn't speak to the desk. They just walked straight through the side door and vanished from frame. That's not you, he said. And it's not me. My stomach dropped. Who is he? He shook his head. No idea. She didn't mention anyone else. I stared at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. I had spent weeks thinking Nate was the problem, that he was the destination. But maybe he was just a detour. Maybe he was just one of many. I stood up. I couldn't sit there any longer. She lied to both of us, I said. You were just smart enough to walk away sooner. He nodded, eyes down. I didn't mean for any of this, he added. If I had known. You didn't. That's clear. There was nothing left to say. As I reached the door, he said one last thing. She said something strange before she left. I turned. She said you were the only one who ever saw her clearly. I didn't respond. Because I didn't. I saw what I wanted to. And now, all that was left was the version of her that neither of us really knew. Outside the office, I walked to my car and sat behind the wheel without turning the engine on. Just breathing. Watching people pass by. Normal people. People picking up coffee, checking their phones, going about their lives. People who didn't know what it felt like to realize your life had chapters you weren't even in. I drove aimlessly for a while, until I ended up near the waterfront. Pulled into a public lot and sat on a bench overlooking the water. The sky was overcast. Wind picking up. Gulls crying in the distance. I took out my phone and opened our last thread of messages. Her final words to me were, "Be kind to yourself." It didn't feel like kindness. It felt like closure disguised as care. Like she wanted to escape clean. No mess. No blood on her hands. But the truth always leaves a mark. I thought confronting Nate would give me answers. Instead, it left me with more questions. And one very clear realization. She wasn't just rewriting her future. She had rewritten her past too. And I was the only one left who remembered the real version of us. I found the box in a rented storage unit under her name. Same one I'd built, now with the clock carefully placed inside. But something was off. The ticking was too faint. I opened the back, my original design, but now there was a hidden compartment I never added. Inside, a pouch of forged documents, passports, birth certificates, all with different names, but one appeared twice, Allison Moore, with different birthplaces, different parents. There was also a note, handwritten on my workshop's old notepad. You dig too deep. You were supposed to be just background. I stood there, cold air biting my skin, realizing she hadn't just lied to me. She'd lied to everyone. Her job, her identity, maybe even her real name. None of it was what it seemed. That wasn't betrayal. It was something worse. She hadn't just left me. She'd disappeared from her own life. I found her in a cafe at the edge of town. No mask, no charm, just silence between us. She didn't run, didn't lie. She said I was the only person she ever felt real with, and handed me an envelope of cash. For the clock, for everything. I didn't take it. She stood, lingered, then left without another word. No apology, no request for forgiveness, just gone. Later that night, I rehung the clock in my workshop. It no longer ticked like it used to, but it didn't hurt to hear it. Not anymore. Because when she pointed at someone else at that party, called it a joke, I realized the joke was never funny. It was a message, and it took me too long to understand it. But now I do. She's gone, and I'm still here. Not broken, just beginning.